Hi everyone. So pleased to welcome you here in Geneva and here remotely. This talk is really important to me because I'm going to share something very personal, but I started and I joined the luxury industry 20 years ago because of the artisan, because of their know-how, because of the great potential, the great skill they have in their hands. And the reason why I wanted to have this panel today is because the luxury won't exist without the talent of all the artisans. And for sure, we have a lot of artisans within our own houses, luxury houses, but there are a lot of great artisans around the world that from which we get inspiration. And today, I wanted to address that topic in a different way. Not only, involving great organization like the MichelAngelo Foundation, but also emphasizing a great organization, a great company here in India. So yes, we are a global event, and it's important as well to have and highlight the work, the commitment, the vision of such a startup that you are going to discover with Gaia Amore. But I also wanted to invite on stage Philippe, who is used to work at Richemont, had different lives, different expertise and background. But here he will emphasize the need of helping the artisan to get their IP protected, but also leverage the new technology such as Web3 to really make sure that they can have a sustainable future and they can get a part of the shared revenues. So please welcome on stage with me today Suzanne Wong, who will moderate this amazing panel. Alberto CAVALLI, Executive Director of the MichelAngelo Foundation. Philippe LUCET, co-founder and Chief Legal Officer of the Silicon Valley Blockchain Society and Rainfall. And remotely from India, we have Ashich TANDON and HINDERMAN from Gaia Amore.
Hi, everybody.
Guys, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So I just wanted to say a very warm welcome to everyone in the room. Thank you for being us on this Sunday, despite the challenges in terms of traffic on this Geneva, very complicated Sunday. Thank you all for being with us. And thank you for joining us from India, Catherine and Ashich. We're here to talk about how luxury brands can help to preserve artisanal skills for a sustainable future. And we have here, obviously, Philippe, we have Alberto, and we have the two co-founders of Gaia Amore. And we're just going to jump straight into it because I believe time is a bit short. So let's just go straight into how I believe, first of all, that we're all on the same page that we should preserve artisanal skills. There's really no question or debate about that. The discussion will really center on how much we should preserve these skills in the traditional context and how far brand involvement should go in this. So I'm going to start with kind of a little grounding question. In your experience, what do you think has been the most successful or impactful example of a brand using their power, their resources to protect and perpetuate the transmission of artisanal skills? Let's start with the example and then followed by perhaps if there are a few lessons that we can learn from this example, what are the takeaways that we can have? Should we start with Alberto?
Thank you. Well, it's a question that already puts us in the middle, I would say at the heart of the subject, because needless to say, the great majority of the luxury brands, of the real luxury brands that we know nowadays, started as artisanal companies. They still bear the name of the man or the woman who founded them, that in many cases was an artisan, himself or herself. So, still, at the center of the identity of the luxury brands, there is a beating heart of the métier d'art, of that fine craftsmanship, which is never just an execution, hands that do like this. I mean, the world is full of that. but hands behind which there is a passion, a talent, a competence, a real desire and the wish to make a difference. These are the real competitive advantage of every luxury brand that wants to position itself in such a crowded market. Yes, the market is crowded, yet fine craftsmanship and that perfect human touch allows every luxury product to stand up. Are there interesting examples about this? I would quote 5, but really mentioning them, and then we'll see if we have the time to go into that. Chanel with Maison de Mode. Chanel, as you know very well, started to buy the artisanal companies that were at the basis of, especially of its haute couture. So from LUCET to Les Mariés to Michel, artisanal brands that are now part of the Chanel galaxy and that also work for other maisons, but that, of course, needless to say, are close to the beating heart of the maison. Hermès, more or less the same. Hermès is very much the artisan of the present and the artisan of the future, and them too, they realized that it was very much the case to secure for themselves the best hands available. Dolce & Gabbana, to quote a brand in fashion, is building its own artisanal workshops inside of the maison for the high jewelry, for the high watchmaking, for the alta moda. Cartier, with its Maison des Métiers d'Art, is securing a crucial passage in order to make sure that the artisans are not only seen as an instrumental part inside of the big machine of a maison, but that are really seen, regarded, and I would say admired as leaders in the creation of a luxury brand. And if I may, I am the director of the MichelAngelo Foundation. The MichelAngelo Foundation has been created by Johann Rupert and Franco Cologni just to give voice, visibility, and value to master artisans. Is this a way to secure their presence also in the world of luxury? We hope so.
That's a fantastic point that you just brought up, by the way, of the practice of brands sometimes purchasing artisans to kind of come in-house and support them in that sense. We'll dive into that question a little bit later, but right now I want to go to you, Catherine and Ashich, calling in. And maybe you could also explain to us, like, just a couple of lines, why are artisanal skills and the preservation of them so important to you specifically at Gaia Amore? Do any case studies stand out to you in your mind where brands can really intervene to help protect and perpetuate such traditions in the industry?
Thanks, Suzanne. I quickly want to get into the story, quick context as to how we set up Gaia Amore and why we set it up. So the idea came to us about 2 years back, when we understood something about respect deficit. And this was an article that came out by Business of Fashion. We spoke of respect deficit with the Indian artisans. And it requires scaling on luxury brands that most of whom are based out of Europe. And we wanted to do our own end of research to see how could we, address that. At the same time, invest our time in building up a luxury brand from the grassroots. So 2 years down the line, here we are. Now, the artisans that we work for, many of them, in fact, are technically not trained. But these are people who come from a tradition that goes back several generations. I refer to our recent visit to Jaipur, where we have a cluster of silver artisans, silversmiths. Without giving names, like talk about this one family that's been silversmithing for the last 26 generations and have a history going back 600 years. And the story resonated with what we had in fact started off by reading the article of Business of Fashion, where because of respect deficit, the children were not interested in taking up the craft. There are many reasons to it. They don't see a future in it. It's still a passion for them. They make ends meet by doing something other than their core skill. And the most appalling thing is they say we don't get the respect as silversmiths. So, but interesting thing is many luxury brands, in fact, come to those markets to get inspired. However, the final product, in fact, is then made in Europe, branded, and then sold at very high price points to discerning patrons in markets that can afford them. Our story about why Gaia Amore came about started with this need to address respect deficit in traditional artisan communities across the world. Of course, technically, we are here in India because that's where we want to core competence. Our base being, with my base being here in India, and the model that we're trying to build is global. So at this point in time, for example, we are already talking to designers who work with traditional artisans in Morocco and Russia, in Ukraine, Lebanon, to name a few.
That's a really interesting point, the point that you just brought up, actually, the fact that it's really up to us to try and reduce a bit of that deficit between the artisans who create and the brands who perhaps profit by it. Philippe, coming over to you, in your perspective or from your experience or point of view, what do you think has been kind of the most successful and also the most sustainable way that you've seen a brand intervene to protect and transmit artisanal traditions?
Yeah, well, it really depends on the type of preservation you want to have. 25 years ago, I already believed that the way we are seeing the world right now with all this digital transformation will also have a counter effect whereby people will be interested in finding very, very high quality craftsmanship and artisanship. And that's what we have been seeing. I really believe that, with these trends towards digitization, right now, people will still try to find this aura of high-end quality products that have been depicted by Walter Benjamin, and we are really all looking for that. I have two examples coming to my mind in terms of archive and online. The first one is the recent work that we have done with the Lifestyle Tech Competence Center in Lugano, whereby we have partnered with Bali in order to digitize all their archives for the last 150 years. Wow. So we are talking about 35,000 pair of shoes. I know that it might be interesting for some people in, in this room. And the objective is basically to digitize all this archive in order for other artisans or other people to have access to them. So that's a 3-year-long project. And afterwards, the archive will be exhibited online, but also at the Villa Elenium in Lugano. The second example which is coming to my mind is in terms of digitization and online sales. So I spent 10 years working with great colleagues in this room for Richemont, launching online and e-commerce projects all over the world, with a very, very strong focus as well on artisanship, craftsmanship, and all the traditions that you have underlined that the maisons as Richemont have for many years. There is one other project I have been dreaming of for during these years, is how we could be able to build a platform whereby artisans could meet the demands, not only using the traditional channels of the luxury, but being able to have this kind of direct intermediation between artisans and the demand, and that's what Gaia Amore is doing, so I'm very pleased to have them on this panel today.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent take, and I think we all really support and are cheering for you in that sense to allow local artisans that may not have that kind of access to really open them up to new audiences, yes, global audiences in a way that benefits them and benefits the work that they're doing. Now, let's really start to talk about how much we're looking for brand involvement in this sort of activities, because we can look at both sides of the questions. Of course, there are examples in which brands have brought struggling artisans or struggling artisanal workshops into the corporate structure and hierarchy, and therefore helped them with their resources, with their expertise, with their network to really continue what they are doing. On the other hand, there is the perspective that once these artisans become part of a brand, once they become in-house, that knowledge is then siloed off from the rest of the industry, which doesn't promote a lot of in terms of technical or technique diversity and things like that. I think, Alberto, you brought up a point earlier about this sort of example that we're all very familiar with. We've seen various things like that. So, and Philippe, I think you also mentioned that technology will be a very, very strong part of that support as well. So the question is, how far should brands really go in that sense? Is it better just to sort of contribute resources and financial support towards institutions like the MichelAngelo Foundation, which are doing such an amazing job, integrating them in-house, which obviously also, each point has its upsides and downsides. So maybe I'll toss the question to you guys first. Catherine and Ashich to give your take on this.
So it's actually an interesting hybrid model that we have sort of adapted. For the sake of preserving these artisan skills, we can't adopt them and bring them into Gaia Amore without sacrificing a part of who they are and a part of their culture. So by having a sort of hands-off approach where we don't tell them what it is that we want them to design, but give them a sort of guideline of what it is that we're looking for, that helps them to design something that would fit the market we're trying to sell to, but it stays true to the nature of their skills and their history. So that's how we're approaching keeping that intact. Also, when it comes to exclusivity, because we're working with these rural artisans, it's really difficult for them to actually make it to a market. So we give them that leverage and that marketplace. Having said that, by not making them exclusive to us, they are also able to sell to other brands or to on other marketplaces as well. But we also give them the opportunity of having exclusivity with us with certain designs, which gives us that hybrid that I was talking about.
That's an amazing system, actually. I like the fact that you brought up the very important point that you can't necessarily bring artisans into the system without losing a part of the traditions and how they work. And of course, I think we all I hope we all agree that artisanal integrity is a very important part of what they do, and it's definitely something that should be protected at all costs. Philippe, I'm going to come to you because I would like Alberto to wrap up the discussion on this point because, in your view, in your experience, in your long sort of professional career so far, what do you think you would recommend to brands, or what do you think you would personally stand behind? What kind of balance of bringing in-house versus supporting them externally would you push for, would you promote?
Yeah, I really believe it's very difficult to go without the power of a brand right now. I mean, especially in the luxury and fashion field, a brand is still a token of recognition and quality that is visible by everybody. That's why you are able to sell some watches at a very high premium, from the high end to the hyper high end scope in terms of steel watches, for example. So it's very difficult to develop something and invent something in the middle of nowhere if you don't have this kind of increased visibility that a brand is bringing. The question is whether, then you have to be integrated with a brand or not. I think that's a very strong one, but there may be other ways to increase this kind of visibility through partnerships with influencers, for example, whereby you are able to promote the craftsmanship, but you don't have the same type of structure, which might sometimes be rigid, of the major groups, but whereby you are able as well to increase your audience and visibility. I mean, setting up a platform is only the first step. It's difficult, but it can be done. But afterwards, you have very, very high marketing costs, which are absolutely necessary to cut through the noise. So if you don't have the power of a brand or the power of an influencer behind that, that's very difficult to do it.
That's a very important point they just brought up, that the visibility brought by a brand is something that we cannot overlook or cannot really neglect. And perhaps what you suggested in terms of limited collaborations and maybe capsule collections, things like that, that could be a kind of solution for us to bring that level of visibility without necessarily integrating these independent artisans wholesale into the structure. Alberto, what's your take on this?
Well, I think there are three issues to identify: what the maisons should do, what the artisans should do, what we all should do. I will start from this last point. What we all should maybe, could, might,
what do you recommend?
Possibly what we recommend. Well, I direct a foundation. A foundation is a cultural institution, because actually to acknowledge and to give visibility and value to the work of the master artisans, either you look at them with a different eyes and different perspectives. So either we really change the culture around craftsmanship, or we don't go anywhere, because up until the point where there is this sort of craft washing, where craftsmanship is only seen as a bad makeup, we don't go anywhere else. We really don't go up to the point of safeguarding this precious know-how. Give dignity, visibility, and value to the master artisans. Should they be part of a maison? Should they be an independent atelier? That is not the matter. The matter is how we approach them. Sometimes there is a kind of a gentle racism towards artisan, with this kind of condescending attitude. Oh, so you're an artisan? Ooh. So what?
As if what they do is not as high quality
Exactly.
or as exclusive
Kind
or
of, you
prestigious.
know, watching panda at the zoo. That is really not the point. I do believe that the role of the cultural institutions and the role of the maisons in this run in parallel. Give dignity and visibility to the master artisans without exploiting them for a bad marketing, but really giving them again the place they deserve inside of the maison or outside. So this is what the maisons should be doing, to get back to the second point. Be authentic. Without authenticity, you don't go anywhere else. Maybe the beating heart of that maison is hyper-technology. That's fine, but don't pretend that you have an artisanal heart if you don't have it. You know, the world is big and there is space for everybody and everything. But if you want to treasure fine craftsmanship, we have to look at it and define it for what it really is. This is also the basis of any protection of intellectual property. And what the artisans should be doing, if I may, they should never be afraid to show the happiness they have in what they do. Because, I mean, I'm 47 years old. I will be able to retire when I am maybe 120. And like for my students at the Polytechnic University of Trento, they will never retire. So from now to, 120, for the next 80 years when we have to work, can we please try to be happy with what we do? And the artisans witness this at the best, even if life is tough, even if it's complicated, even if sometimes you're not acknowledged, but yet every day is a challenge and every day you can reveal the happiness in what you do. I think this is a revolutionary message for the young generations.
I think that's amazing what you just brought up, that, you know, it should really be about respect for the work and what it represents, instead of focusing on the exoticism or the lack of familiarity that we have with certain artisanal techniques. You used a very interesting word just now, craft washing. Is that something that you guys came up with? Is it something that's used in this sphere a lot? Could you unpack that term a little for us and for the audience?
It's enough that you go to any supermarket. Normal biscuits, 4 francs. Artisanal biscuits, 7 francs. But why? I mean, is there a moment into which an industrial product becomes artisanal? Because, hey, the adjective artisanal is translated into money, into profit, into cash. According to whom and according to what? So the same word, artisanal, can be applied to devaluate something, like, you know, that's artisanal, it means it's been done somehow, or it can increase the value. But what is behind this process?
Yes.
In the investigation about this, there is everything. If now the adjective artisanal is used or crafted, you go to any, you know, coffee shop and the coffee beans artisanally crafted, toasted for you. Eh? No, but I mean, what do you mean? Is there a nice old woman somewhere toasting the coffee beans?
Yeah.
I don't think so. So, this is craft washing.
But
know
you've
what
hit
I
on
mean?
something that I think concerns a lot of us here. Is there a need for that kind of control over the language that we use, or that kind of terminology? Because, as you said, it is quite nebulous and people use it quite, you know, quite liberally. Craftsmanship, artisanal. Is there a need for that kind of control? Or like it has to meet certain standards
There
or
is,
guidelines?
at the same time, you know, the tougher you push, the easier it is to, you know, avoid control. I think, once again, and sorry to repeat myself, what we need to work on is culture. Because if you give people the means to understand if someone is deceiving them or not, then you already kind of, you know, put people at their own place. Give people the instruments to understand, rather than promoting 1 million laws that will be, you know, bypassed by 1 million creative solution.
Yes, because
empower people, and people will understand.
in that sense, you're very much empowering and allowing audiences to approach them in the correct way, in the way that would fully respect what it is they're doing. Catherine and Ashich, I see you've been nodding along quite a lot during the course of this discussion. Is there something that you want to reinforce or perhaps add your own example or perspective to what Alberto just told us?
Absolutely. I would highlight authenticity, something that Alberto touched on in the beginning. In order for something to truly be called artisanal, I think you have to be able to prove it. And to bring a customer, or we like to call them patrons, directly to the artisan allows for that connection to be made and a relationship to be built. So for a brand to be able to facilitate that kind of relationship that normally isn't there is a huge step in the right direction, not just for sustainability, but also for the growth of the consumer market and for artisans, because they get a platform to connect with the global world. And that's really difficult when you're talking about illiterate rural artisans who have very, very little to their name and have, if they're illiterate, then they don't even have an education outside of the one skill that they know how to do that's been passed on for generation to generation. So in order for us to really be authentic to ourselves and be authentic to these artisans, then we have to be able to, say who they are and present them to the world along with the products that they're making that we are all enjoying and all benefiting off of.
I think very intuitively, we all agree with that in order to call yourself an artisan, you have to be able to prove it. You have to be able to show something for it. My follow-up question to that is, what kind of proof are we talking about, and how easy or practical is that to enforce? Because would there be, for example, genuine artisans who might get left behind due to a situation where they might not necessarily tick every box on the proof list? You know what I mean?
So yeah, I like to take that question. Thanks, Suzanne. So the way that we're trying to do it, and I'll come to technology later. So for each and every product the physical product that you buy off of our e-commerce store, you cannot buy it unless and until you see the artist for yourself. So the entire biodata of the artist who made that product, the way the product is made, some elements of the manufacturing process is all mentioned there. So our experience, the customer experience of buying a Gaia Amore product is not like your regular e-commerce. Not only that, there is a big technology play that we are going to have and launch in a few months, which is built around blockchain. The idea being that when we, for example, take sound bites of an artisan with whom we are working, that will be put on the block. When the product is being manufactured, those images will be put on the block. When we have a video of the artisan making the product, that will be put on the block. Leading to the final product, it will be tracked to the patron, and therefore it will be there for the entire world to audit as proof of work, right? So by doing this, we want to be transparent, A. We also wish to be sustainable. Reason being that we are trying to ensure continuity of an art form that is likely to get lost in our lifetimes. So we want to be party to making that change and giving this option to other brands to follow, that this can be done. You just have to have the will for, running with it.
Thank you so much. That sounds like a really robust solution, actually, and something that takes care of as many angles as possible. You've also brought us very nicely to the next discussion point, so thank you so much for doing that, doing my job for me. The role of innovation and technology, and Philippe, this is where you can really kind of show us what you've got. Now, we want to talk about how innovation, because you brought up a little point earlier also related to that, how innovation may hold the key to the long-term preservation of valuable patrimony as record keeping and knowledge transmission through technology becomes easier. You mentioned also that protections are important, that artisans are better protected with tools that can help assert their IP, allowing them to share their savoir-faire without risk, and therefore, I think we can all agree that that benefits everyone. What are some ways that this is being done now, and what more could we expect to do in the future?
Yes, there are 2 points which are very important, which have just been said. The one is about protection, and the second one is about fair retribution. And that's the point, I would like to come back later on, maybe as a conclusion. But in terms of protection, there is always a question between the protection and the enforcement. In the past few decades, and I'm be careful about what I say because there are some of the best IP lawyers that I know in this room. But in the past decades, the level playing field in terms of protection as IP has been increasing tremendously. The real point is not about the protection of IP rights. It's about the enforcement of IP rights. This constant battle between the manufacturers, the artisans, and the producers of counterfeit goods. And it's a never-ending story. And I really believe that moving from Web 1.20 to Web 1.30 technology can really help, whereby people can not only read, write, but can only own data and their own creation. There are several use cases that we can have in terms of blockchain be used for the protection of artisan and IP rights. In terms of the protection, the traceability of IP, I can think of 5 use cases. The traceability of the origin of goods and all the steps in the value chain. The protection of IP, especially what we call unregistered IP rights. So you know that in terms of IP, you have the registered IP rights and the unregistered IP rights, which are getting more and more important, especially in the digital field. So
for our audience, perhaps, could you give us an example of something that is protected and something that is not?
So registered is typically patents, trademarks, some of the designs. Unregistered is what is increasing over the past 20 years, especially in the field of digital. So we are talking about copyright. Anything that is online can be copyrighted. We are talking about designs, certain designs. We are talking about trade secrets. And these rights are protected from their origin, but it's very, very difficult to show that you have anteriority. So the objective is to develop a system whereby it's very, very simple for artisans to show that they are the source of the creation. So it's very important in terms of traceability. It's very important in terms of IP protection as well. We can think of about protection of sketches, for example, for designers. We can think of about the protection of the design, either from innovative small designers or even major groups or luxury or fashion groups, because the volumes do not allow for the protection on an ongoing basis of some of the designs. So you need to have some kind of technical solution. We can think about the protection of all the R&D steps that exist in the process, or the protection of know-how. Afterwards, we can definitely develop these kind of systems in terms of licensing the intellectual property or giving access to additional rights, for example, additional experiences, that people can use to a certain fee, and that would be associated with the production of goods. And finally, there are 2 other cases whereby intellectual property, intangible assets, or collectibles, or works of art could be used as a collateral in order to develop some financing. If you look at the balance sheet of the major groups right now, usually intangible assets is the 3rd line on the balance sheet, and it's not really used. It's either on the balance sheet. Same in terms of collectible goods. They could be developed and they could be used as well as a source of financing and collateral. And the final point for me, which is probably one of the most important, you spoke about craft washing. That's the first time I hear the word. But I know very well the word grid washing that we all know. I think it's happening a lot in the industry, not only this industry, but generally speaking. And if we really want to put a system in place, we could definitely technologically put a system in place whereby you have a fair retribution to the producers at source. The question is whether we want to do that. That's a point we can discuss in terms of conclusion.
Of course. I mean, that's a conversation that could go on for hours. But in your opinion, how far away do you think we are from that ideal level of protection that would strike the perfect balance between allowing artisans to flourish while still also leaving enough space for others to innovate? How far are we from that?
I think we are very close to it. There are solutions which have been developed. I started my first company when I was 27 or 28 years old. That was some time ago. At that time, we were using centralized technology in order to protect any kind of craftsmanship or artisanship. So you could send us a file, we would timestamp it using 5 atomic clocks, and we will send it back encrypted so that in case of litigation, you had the first proof to show the anteriority of your rights. So 20 years ago, basically, we failed because it was costing a lot in terms of infrastructure. We spent a lot of money in terms of developing the infrastructure, and nothing was left for marketing afterwards, so I know very well the issue. But 20 years, 25 years later, I became very interested in blockchain because you could do exactly the same at a fraction of the cost. And there are some projects right now which are developing, which are absolutely key, and they are very, very close to bringing these kind of solutions.
Thank you so much for that excellent summary and sort of state of the industry as to where we are now. I'm going to throw the floor open in a couple of minutes so that we can take some questions addressed to our panelists. But before we do that, so it gives you some time to think about what questions you want to ask. I know it always takes a bit of time to work up the volunteer to ask a question, but I always like to end with something that is a bit actionable in terms of our discussion that we're having here, the audiences can take home in terms of insights. What are the biggest challenges right now facing traditional artisanal skills? What is something simple that all of us can do on an individual level to help? Alberto, do you want to kick this off?
The three main challenges are the 3 I's: ignorance, invisibility, irrelevance. Ignorance. We talk about artisans and we have no idea what we are talking about. This brings to invisibility. So all the centers of every city from Geneva to Milan to whatever, they all look very much the same. So where are the artisans? Even when you purchase luxury goods, where are the artisans? Where do you see their role? So you have no idea what you're talking about. You don't see anything about that, so they are irrelevant. Irrelevance is, I would say, the most dangerous challenge because it means that there is no way that the artisans can make a difference. So that suit has not been done carefully, but who cares? Someone will buy it. You know what I mean? So the minute where we give up the idea that human talent can make a difference, we are lost. And what we can do every day is to demand to be always aware of what we are buying, of what we are purchasing, of what we are keeping. And I think an event like Reluxury can really help us to focus on this. We all have the right to buy better and to keep the things we love because they are made with care. The landfills are not filled with luxury goods. They are filled with the stupid things we buy because we think they are cool, and then we throw them away. This is something I think we should be doing every day, not because we have to spend a fortune. It's not a matter of putting a price tag close to everything. It's not a matter of price, it's a matter of values.
Thank you so much. I just love that point that you just made, that just by being at Reluxury, you're being a part of the movement for the better. I think we all appreciate that a lot. Philippe, do you have anything to add before our overseas guests take the last note on this particular point?
Yeah, for me, I mean, the most important challenge right now is sustainability and fair trade. That's something which is very, very close to my heart. A few years ago, in 2017, I presented the World Intellectual Property Report on intangible assets in global value chain. So the wording seems very complicated, but the point is that how we give back to the producers, how we give back to the artisans the fair share of what they have been contributing to. So at that time, I was looking at blockchain technology, especially in the field of coffee, and we definitely have, and which is very different, but it could apply to anything. We could definitely put this kind of technological system in place, whereby each step of the value chain is measured and a fair retribution is paid back to the producer. The question is whether we have the willingness to do it or not. And that's another story. One of the companies I founded with Indian partners, by the way, is in a field which is quite close. It's in the field of data. So right now, you know that you don't own the data, you don't own your phone, and you are not benefiting from your data. Major groups are benefiting from your data. So the objective of this company is basically to develop an app whereby you give us access to certain data, and whereby we are using 6 layers of anonymization in order to extract some kind of anonymous insights that we can then resell anonymously to marketers. And the objective by design of this platform is to get back 85% of the value to the data creators. So only 15% will be allocated to the foundation. We are developing the system right now, and our objective is really an impact project, is give back maybe $4 or $5 to everybody, to every user, at the horizon of 5 years. So $4 or $5 per day might not be very important for some people in this room, but in certain parts of the world, that can make the difference. So we're really focusing on that.
I love that you're really emphasizing it's all about bringing a kind of discourse that is more fair, more just, a good exchange on both sides.
Yes.
Catherine and Ashich, I'm going to let you guys take the last word on this point before we open the audience to questions.
Amazing. So this is actually a great segue that Philippe just brought up this point. So we have a very similar model where we give a percentage of every single purchase back to the artisans that actually work on that particular product. And when we were developing Gaia Amore and trying to understand how we can redefine the new luxury category and how we can be different and be empathetic and be true to ourselves as people too, was building a community of patrons who understand why this is so important. And by paying a little bit extra for a product and understanding where that extra bit of money is going is really key. So as we interact with our artisans and that the relationship between the artisan communities and Gaia Amore grows, we're able to better understand who they are, what kind of challenges they face on an individual level and on a family level. Because then this percentage that we take and give back to them, we can really impact in their lives in a manner that impacts that or that helps and benefits them directly. And by capturing all of this as stories, as videos that we can then bring back to our patrons and say that, you know, the extra $12 that you paid on this bag is going towards these artisans. Now, like Philippe said, you might not think that that's very much, but that's a huge amount for these guys. For someone that's only making $2 a day, it literally will change their lives. And some of them, you know, some of our artisans are only looking for something simple like a fan in their workspace or a fan in their home. They're not asking for very much. So the amount of impact that we can do with such a little amount becomes actually so much more. It's just a matter of perspective. So when we take these stories and bring them back to our patrons and say that you bought a bag. Now, this bag has true value to it because we showed you whose hands actually touched it. We showed you who they were, their face, we told you their stories, how many kids they have, their family members, what kind of challenges that they're facing, the fact that they can't pay for their children's tuition. And here you are directly impacting them because through Gaia Amore, you're able to help send their kids to school and improve their lives. And ultimately, we're looking to not only improve the lives of our artisans in India, but to do this same model throughout all of the very culturally rich communities across the world. So we think that this is the best way, as we have understood it, to approach this to help our customers make progress in their lives.
Can I just say how happy I am with this panel today? You've just summarized everything perfectly in a nutshell. It's about education of the audience. It's about broadening the culture of artisanal craft appreciation. And it's about empowerment of the artisans themselves. On that note, I'm going to open the floor to audience Q&A. If anyone has a hand, please go ahead. Someone will come to you with a microphone.
Thank you very much for the discussion. It's very interesting. I would have 2 questions. First questions, when we talk about jewelry, most of the jewels are being cut in India. And most of the craft within the jewelry sectors is done in India. Why? Because there is the artisanal knowledge that is just left there. However, for ignorance, nowadays, companies that are working in jewelry sectors are not willing to release the fact that their supply chain is heavily depending on craftsmanship in India. And for example, I'm working for many luxury brands, and one of it would like to disclose, but they're very afraid of doing so because Indian craft can have, in some part of the world, a very negative image. And I was wondering how we can fight this ignorance, because all the stone, they are cut cheap. Well, 98% for the diamonds. The craftsmanship is in India, so that's one of my questions. How we can help brands to change and to disclose a bit how supply chain is really made and try to share better the value. And my last point, it's about cultural appropriation. Many luxury brands are having issues in terms of cultural appropriations, and I would like to raise this question.
I think that question is applicable to pretty much everyone sitting on this panel. I think we see the same stigma as well in watchmaking for parts that are manufactured in China. There is a whole cultural resistance to being open and transparent about where a lot of these skills originate from. Who wants to take the hot potato?
May I?
Please.
So I think that's a great question, in fact. Thank you so much. I think there has to be some sort of a concerted movement wherein we tell the customers and the patrons to actually ask these brands and seek information. If you continue to buy into the greenwashing story and the stories being dished out to you for so many years, then I'm sorry, you're part of the problem. So that's where our model is very, very transparent. In fact, so as I was trying to tell you that if you were to go and buy a Gaia Amore product, you cannot unsee our artist and the place of work. So it may come as a shock to you, but we're not here peddling shock. I mean, we're just telling you reality that these are the hands. This is the living condition of these people who made this beautiful product, which we believe you would invest in and then give back to them, right? So I think the responsibility is on the customer.
I would like to add one point to this, though. I think it's up to brands as well, simply because brands are the ones that have the most control of the information. The customer can only go so far because they're not in the industry. So it's up to each of us to really talk about and change the narrative, essentially.
Yes.
And it's like anything. If you don't like your image, you have to do the work to change it. But you have to believe it too. So if a brand, and this is something that we're very proud of. So for example, if we do talk about the fact that our jewelry is made in India, we've faced this as well, that people don't really understand how important jewelry is in India's culture going back millennia. And it is not small and tiny. I mean, they're exuberant type of jewelry. So in order for people to really understand this, it has to be talked about. It has to be displayed. And the brands that are using stones that come from India should be proud of that. And they should talk about and really talk about why they're using stones from India and talk about India's history. And I think that's the easiest way to really move forward.
I think that's really something for brands to take note of, their responsibilities in this area, to stop practices that erase the role of the artisan, and like Alberto, you mentioned before, putting value in its right place. I think we have a question from the gentleman in the first row.
Does it work? Mentioning like values. Thank you. With all the bombardments, messages and memes, acceleration and events, how do you create, or how would you propose brands to create moments that give the client the focus and time to really get into this information you mentioned, like about the creators, about the the time they put in, how many children they have, and like how many hours they were working on this project? How do you create these special moments that the client can really dive into this universe and doesn't get distracted from, let's say, Ukraine or meme stocks and other things?
I think we have the perfect person here to answer this, Alberto, and what he's doing with Homo Faber in Venice. Take it away.
Yes, well, Homo Faber, you also know it because you've seen it. Homo Faber is a celebration of everything that human hands can do and will always be able to do better than any machine. It's an event that takes place every 2 years in Venice that brings together, with the specific points of view, a number of objects, of makers, and of brands from all over the world around a theme. In 2022, the theme was The Living Treasures. And I think that this already, you know, to give this specific angle already opens a number of opportunities to understand. Then brands are very good at making beautiful events where, you know, value is properly conveyed. I think that now, of course, everybody loves a glamour cocktail, but I think that also everybody loves discovering something authentic and truth. Homo Faber was very much about that, and I do believe that many brands are also understanding this, that if you want to leave a mark in your clients' hearts, you have to make them feel at the center of something authentic and beautiful that also encompasses, you know, acknowledges the different origins of a craft, of a stone, of a raw material. This will help brands transforming their objects from beautiful to meaningful. And I do believe this is very much done thanks to the acknowledgement of craftsmanship.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thank
Amazing.
you.
I'm
Over
going
to you,
to join
Stephanie.
you guys because you made my day. I mean, literally.
Very happy to hear that.
I mean, all of this is just to make sure that we emphasize this. I mean, we combine in that discussion, we emphasize so much key point that, you know, luxury, fashion, beauty industry should really embrace, because it's all about making it for a true purpose. And thanks very much, Alberto, for bringing, you know, that very authentic speech. I think that we need that, you know, disclose the secret behind, you know, luxury. And it's so important that we support the artisans because it's the DNA of this industry. Catherine and Ashich, I mean, I fell in love with you as soon as I met you in Dubai. You have a true vision of, you know, how we can disrupt all of this and make sure that we are not embracing, you know, those transformations, sustainability, technology transformation only in the developed countries, but we make sure that we spread and we bring a lot of justice also in that world, because I mean, I don't believe in a sustainable world if there are, you know, if we care about certain women or certain clients and we don't take care about the people who are doing, you know, what we sell every day. So, and Philippe, thank you so much, because you are, sorry, I'm going to say it, but a sort of alien, you know, combining legal knowledge, but having this entrepreneurial mindset and understanding the technology, which brings so much, you know, to this panel, because I truly believe that technology will solve and will support the fact that we will, you know, end, you know, some friction, some situation that we have been facing during the last decades. Thank you so much, Suzanne. I mean, you just moderated the way that, you know, I think that all the audience could stay during hours to listen and go into more details. Thank you so much. I've been, I mean, visiting dozens and dozens of workshops of this artisan during my 2 years around the world. So that's maybe a reason why, you know, this panel is a bit particular to me, because we bring, you know, the artisan, the culture, and behind, you know, this artisan, it's all about intangible heritage, and this makes the culture of every single country. So that is absolutely critical to protect. And by embedding, encrypting all of that in a blockchain, it's a way to make sure that we, I mean, we secure all this knowledge, all this know-how, for the future generation. So thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for coming, because I think it's important that we spread the word, we spread the right messages, and we give a true feedback to our brand, saying it's time to move, it's time to do something, and stop, washing, talking. It's time for acting. It's time for proving. I recommend you, and I will end. Sorry, it was a long conclusion, but I'm very passionate, and I think we all are here. There is one book that everybody should read from Ben Horowitz. We are what we do. And I think it's time for being authentic and bring a lot of trust in what we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much.